Well, good morning. Thank you all for joining us. Up here with me this morning are obviously Lieutenant Governor, our Labor Secretary Kelly Schultz, Commerce Secretary Mike Gill, Secretary Lourdes Padilla of the Department of Human Services, and I thought we had Jimmy Reed, but I don't see him, from the Governor's Office of Small Minority Women's Affairs. Our Chief Legislative Officer, Senator Chris Schenck. In December of last year, I was very proud to become the first Republican governor in America to introduce a statewide measure to expand paid sick leave. Our common sense proposal was a direct, thoughtful, and honest effort to move forward on an issue that had not been acted on even after a half-decade of debate in Annapolis. We hoped to reach a compromise and a much-needed balance between providing more benefits to hardworking Marylanders without hurting our economy, killing small businesses, and laying off the men and women who are employed by them. Our goal with our legislation last year was to provide paid sick leave to every Maryland worker without dictating to or imposing costly regulations on our small business job creators. Our proposal would have required large businesses to provide paid sick leave, and it would have enabled small businesses to offer paid sick leave by providing them tax incentives to help offset the costs of these additional benefits. We preferred a carrot rather than a stick approach, rewarding rather than punishing small businesses. Our plan would have covered far more Marylanders than the bill which passed by the legislature. In fact, our plan made it possible for every employee in Maryland, 100% of the men and women in our state's workforce, to be covered. Our 2017 Paid Sick Leave Act would have even covered part-time employees. It did not force businesses that already had a paid sick leave policy, which met the requirements, to change their existing policy. Our bill, the Common Sense Paid Leave Act, provided protections for seasonal jobs, and it would have honored all existing collective bargaining agreements. When we introduced our Common Sense Paid Leave proposal just a little over a year ago, I made it very clear that we were not drawing a line in the sand. We repeatedly extended an invitation to legislative leaders to join us in an open, honest dialogue so that together we could find a balanced, fair, compromise approach to paid sick leave in Maryland. Regrettably, the legislature refused to engage in any discussions with our administration. In fact, they failed to take any action whatsoever on this common sense paid sick leave measure. They simply put it in a drawer and refused to ever bring it to the floor of the House or the Senate for a vote. Rather than working with us in good faith, certain members of the legislature instead took it upon themselves to mislead the public and demonize our sincere efforts to move forward on this important issue. Instead, they chose to ram through on a party line vote a terrible bill, one that even the liberal Democratic legislature had voted against 5 years in a row. It was a confusing, unwieldy, unfair, and deeply flawed bill. The legislative leaders across the aisle passed it hoping, in fact, knowing that I would be forced to veto it. They chose to play politics, to have an election year issue to campaign on, rather than a real solution that we could all get behind that would provide sick leave to more Marylanders without crushing small mom-and-pop businesses and killing thousands of jobs. It was the exact same partisanship that never worked together and never get anything done, the finger-pointing, the point-scoring politics that we see almost every day in Washington. People of Maryland deserve better than that. Instead of a bipartisan bill that would continue to move Maryland forward in a positive direction, we got a bill that would be disastrous to our state economy, would make Maryland less competitive in the region. This misguided bill, which I vetoed, would kill small businesses, jeopardize thousands of Maryland jobs, and it actually could have the potential to undermine much of the economic progress that we have made here, turning Maryland's economy around. The bill, which passed the legislature, would hurt the very workers that they say they intended to help, and it ignores and completely leaves out the workers who need paid sick leave the most. A particularly egregious provision of the vetoed bill actually gives bosses the right to demand information on employees' personal and sensitive health issues as a condition in order for them to receive sick leave. Let me be clear, no one should be forced to share sensitive personal information with their boss in order to get sick leave. In May of this year, I vetoed the job-killing, burdensome, and misguided bill. It was the right course of action to protect our workers, our state economy, and our individual privacy. My veto was not the end of the discussion. It was an invitation, once again, for open and honest dialogue so that together we could get this right. It also took, or we also took immediate action, executing 3 executive orders, one of which provided paid sick leave benefits to all of the state's contractual employees in the executive branch. And Anne Arundel County Executive Steve Shue and Howard County Executive Alan Kittleman, both of whom are here with us today, also have taken those same steps to expand paid sick leave benefits to their own county contractual employees. I urged the Senate President and the House Speaker to extend those same benefits to their own contractual workers in the legislative branch. Unfortunately, they have failed to do so. It is, in my opinion, the height of hypocrisy to pass legislation that forces mandates, puts mandates upon struggling mom-and-pop businesses to pay for benefits that the legislature themselves refuse to pay for their own workers. The second executive order, which I signed into law, authorized all Maryland procurement authorities, including Department of Budget and Management, Transportation, General Services, Information Technology, and others, to begin giving a contractual preference to contractors who offered paid sick leave to their employees. Finally, my third executive order directed the Maryland Department of Labor, the Governor's Office of Minority Affairs, the Maryland Department of Commerce, the Department of Human Services to conduct a comprehensive collaborative field study to determine the realities and the potential impact of the paid sick leave bill. For employees and employers across the state, I appointed our Labor Secretary, Kelly Schultz, to lead the task force, which has just submitted to me their final report, right here. And in this final report, after conducting 6 months of exhaustive in-person interviews with impacted employees and employers from one end of the state to the other, rather than requiring Marylanders most likely impacted by this bill to leave their jobs behind and to trek to Annapolis and wait for hours in order to testify, the committee went out directly to the state's workers and business owners, meeting with them in their own communities. And I want to thank all of the members of the task force and Secretary Schultz for their extensive work on this important issue. The report is complex, but the findings strongly confirm that the vetoed bill has major policy and legal flaws and numerous unintended negative consequences. One of the main concerns that was repeatedly expressed to the members of the Paid Committee were the onerous bureaucratic provisions and mandated accounting, legal, and compliance procedures which this confusing, complicated bill would force them to contend with. Business owners who are currently treating their workers fairly and who are trying to do the right thing would run the risk of being found in violation of the law with the presumption of guilt, which would carry with it heavy and severe civil penalties. According to the task force, last year's bill would create crippling hardships for employers in the tourism and hospitality industries, especially in places like Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore that have a high demand for seasonal workers during peak seasons. And a dozen members of the Women's Caucus, in a letter earlier this month to the Speaker and the Senate President, expressed grave concerns, in fact, outrage over the fact that under that bill, an employee would be put in a situation where he or she is obligated by law to reveal deeply personal and private information about a domestic violence issue, sexual assault, or a sensitive medical procedure before they could receive paid sick leave. Marylanders deserve better than this. And fortunately, there is still time for us to work together to correct all of the many terrible flaws of that piece of legislation so that we might be able to provide paid sick leave to more hardworking Marylanders. So today I'm announcing that on the first day of the legislative session, we will introduce emergency legislation, the Paid Leave Compromise Act of 2018. Once again, we are reaching across the aisle and asking legislative leaders to work with us to provide paid sick leave to more hardworking Marylanders. We crafted our new common sense legislation using the legislature's vetoed bill as a starting point, as the base document which we marked up. Under our compromise, businesses with 25 or more employees would be required to phase in these benefits over 3 years. It would give the smallest of Maryland business and job creators time to plan for this and to prepare for it financially and to build it into their budgets. These new paid benefits would be phased in similar to the same common sense approach that other states have taken, like New York and Rhode Island. Starting in 2018, businesses of 50 or more employees will be required to provide paid sick leave. In 2019, businesses with 40 or more employees will provide the benefit, and by 2020, the bill will extend to all businesses with 25 or more employees. Our compromise measure includes language originally introduced by the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee Chairman, Bobby Zirkin, which allows qualifying businesses that can demonstrate a significant financial hardship. They can apply for a hardship waiver with the Department of Labor. Under our proposal, all employees will accrue 1 hour of paid leave for every 30 hours worked, up to a maximum of 40 hours. That means every worker will receive these benefits. This new legislation will alleviate the onerous administrative burdens which the bill that I vetoed would have created. No small business owner, in my opinion, should have to hire an HR director just to try to comply with one overly complex and burdensome law. Under the new legislation, enforcement will be modeled on our existing minimum wage law in order to create consistency and to make it easier for Maryland small businesses to comply. The Paid Leave Compromise Act of 2018 will provide Marylanders with paid sick leave, no questions asked. Just as we did last year, we will be starting the legislative session by proposing common sense legislation designed to extend paid sick leave to Maryland workers without crushing small businesses and killing jobs. Now, I preferred the proposal that we introduced last year, which had the potential to cover every single Maryland employee, down to one employee businesses. I've always believed that we should work together in a bipartisan manner to reach common sense solutions and compromise. So we will be introducing, in addition to this, a tandem bill, which is called the Small Business Relief Tax Credit, which will provide $100 million in tax incentives for small businesses to offset some of the costs of providing these benefits to their employees. The legislature's bill, which I vetoed last year, did not cover people who are employed by smaller businesses, and it purposely left out hundreds of thousands of people whom they exempted. Our $100 million small business tax relief credits will incentivize those smallest of businesses to offer these benefits. Our 2018 legislation will provide a per employee tax credit to small businesses which offer paid leave and other benefits such as child care assistance, health savings accounts contributions, commuter benefits, or tuition assistance. Our legislation will enable small businesses to offer paid leave to mothers, fathers, working families, and to many other hardworking Marylanders. The bill would have left a lot of people behind, the bill which I vetoed. The legislature's proposal would provide exemptions to special interest groups that had lobbyists, which influenced the legislative leaders. Now, some exemptions may be necessary, but they should not be at the expense of Maryland's working families. We need the legislative leaders across the aisle to finally come to the table and to work with us on behalf of the people of Maryland on paid sick leave. Our administration continues to remain ready, willing to meet with them at any time to engage in open and honest dialogue in order to reach a compromise on this critical issue. The issue of paid sick leave is much too important, and the impact is too far-reaching for us to risk getting it wrong. Nearly every day, we see the effects of partisanship, of divisive rhetoric, and political polarization in Washington. But we have always chosen a different path. For nearly 3 years, we have repeatedly called on our colleagues on both sides of the aisle in Annapolis to avoid the divisive politics of Washington and to engage in thoughtful, civil debate and to strive for common sense, bipartisan solutions to the serious problems that face us. We will continue to strive toward that middle temperament which our state was founded on.